Okay, here we are at Exeter. We're on runway 26 on the threshold, and we are in an EC135. The sim model that we're using is from helisimmer.com. It's the 135, as I mentioned, and it's pretty good. I quite like it. There's a few bits and pieces that are not quite right, but for general handling, it's absolutely fine. If you use this flight model yourselves, this aircraft, then I highly recommend that you go to their website. I'll put a link in the comments. And use their tutorial video on how to set up the controls and just get yourself familiar with the aircraft. Also, the other thing I would strongly recommend, in fact, to be perfectly honest, you're probably not really going to be able to achieve today's exercise, which is going to be basic hovering. You're not going to be able to achieve that unless you've got full access control. So joystick, the throttle, I've got set up in the reverse sense to what you may have set up for a fixed-wing aircraft. So my throttle is all the way forward for no power, i.e. collective down. And then I pull the throttle towards me, i.e. backwards, to raise the collective and pull in power. Okay, I've also got yaw pedals as well set up, which again, really crucial. So highly recommend that you get that kind of configuration before trying to do this. Okay, so today I want to look at some basic hovering techniques. If you were doing this exercise for real in a real aircraft with an instructor, there's a couple of things that the instructor would do. Firstly, we'd take you to a nice clear area, and also tell all other users in air traffic control what you're doing, so you've got a nice free area to operate in without too many distractions. So that's what I've done today. I've gone to runway 26 threshold. We've got no arrivals, no departures for the time being, and I've told air traffic control what we're doing, and we've got this. We've got the threshold here and the runway for the next 15 minutes. The other thing that an instructor would do in a real lesson is they would give their student control of the aircraft one sort of axis at a time. So, for example, the instructor would probably retain control of the cyclic and the collective, and in a hover, hand over the pedals to the student, and then the student can get a feel for yawing the aircraft in the hover. And then once he or she's got the hang of that, the instructor would then probably hand over the collective so that the student can have a feel for controlling height and yaw, and then finally hand over the cyclic. Clearly, we can't do that today. We're going to be, I'll be doing a demonstration, and then it'll be over to you in your own aircraft, your own flight simulators, for you to give it a go yourselves. The other thing, final point as well, I've not hovered a flight sim, i.e. a real flight sim, that's not been a real challenge. Lynx Mark 3, Lynx Mark 8, I've got a lot of experience on those. They are a challenge to hover, and to be honest, almost not very realistic close to the ground. Likewise, the 135 simulator at Staverton, same thing. I think the problem is the texture and the detail of the ground when low down is not very good. The peripheral vision is not very good either, so that makes judging distance a bit more of a challenge, and also quite often the control loading is not quite right as well, etc. So they are challenging, even real flight simulators, so to speak. Likewise, it's the same in X-Plane as well, unfortunately. However, the techniques that I'm going to talk through today will still apply and hopefully should improve your hovering abilities. Okay, so I'll get airborne very quickly, very soon, but what I want to just quickly talk about is use of markers. So I'll edit these on the video afterwards, but I'm going to be using some forward markers down the end of the runway. I'm also going to be using some lateral markers, so I've got some trees a couple of 100 yards away there. Down the runway, I've got like a white building just to the right of the runway, but I've also got various trees and other features with vertical extent. So I'm going to be using those as a reference to keep the aircraft straight. I'm going to be using my markers out in the right 3 o'clock there to judge my forward and rearwards movement. And then I'll also be controlling my height using something called the backdrop technique, which I'll explain once we get ourselves into the hover. So let's get airborne then. So a quick set of checks. Just going to quickly, in no particular order, autopilot's on, high NR's on, that's rising, which we expect. CWP is clear, CAD is clear, T's and P's all stable and in limits, instruments all correctly set. We've got standard pressure 1013 set today as it happens, which gives us 100 foot above sea level, which is correct. We're all strapped in. My buddy there, who is really boring, he's strapped in and secure, as am I. So hands on the controls then, looking well ahead down the runway, picking my markers, and I'm pulling in a bit of power, just glancing down. I can see the torque's increasing, and as we put in a bit of power, we're going to get a little bit of right yaw because we've got a torque reaction. So I'm going to feed in some left pedal to hold that, and we're also going to drift to the right as well because that's as a result of tail rotor drift and roll. There we are, into the hover, losing sight of my markers, so just feeding in a bit of pedal to keep the aircraft straight. and stabilising, hopefully, in the hover. Looking out to the right hand side, I've still got my trees. It doesn't look like I'm drifting forwards or backwards too significantly, although we have drifted off to the right, so I'm going to correct for that. And the important thing here, guys, is to really just take it slowly. You'll probably find that you over control initially, okay? And if that starts happening, just slow down. Don't try and rapidly correct things. I would suggest that you try and correct one thing at a time. So if you're going backwards and climbing, for example, then take your correct your backwards movement, and then once that's under control, then correct your height. Bear in mind that all the controls have a secondary effect on the others. So if you're moving the controls simultaneously too quickly, you're going to over control, and things are going to go badly wrong. The other thing to bear in mind as well is hover height. We've got around about 20 feet or so. That's what I'm aiming for today. I don't want to be hovering low when doing hover practice, especially if I'm going to be moving around, aircraft not fully under control and stuff. If we are at low height, there's a risk that a skid catches the ground, and then we get ourselves into a dynamic rollover situation, which is not great. I have drifted forward slightly, but I'm not too fussed about that. The main thing that I want to try and achieve today is not necessarily super accuracy. It's more talking about the basic techniques. Okay, so I wanted to talk about the backdrop technique, which is how I'm going to maintain and control my height. So what we do is we take a feature in the foreground, or features in the foreground, and we reference them against the background. So I've got a tree in the around about the 1 o'clock at the moment in the foreground, and referenced against the horizon beyond. That top of the tree is level with that horizon. Okay, if I pull in a bit of power, then the tree in the foreground, reference to the horizon, appears to go down. That tells me I'm climbing. Likewise, if I lower the collective and descend, that tree in the foreground appears to go up, reference the horizon, which again tells me I'm descending. So I can use that technique to maintain my height without having to look inside at the instruments. I don't want to be concentrating on the radar, etc. I go back to that position where the tree is on sort of the top of the tree is level with the horizon beyond, and that should give me around about 20 feet. And looking at the radar, yeah, that's pretty much what I've got. Okay, so that's how we maintain the height using the backdrop technique. Okay, we can also use the backdrop technique if we're looking out to the side. I have drifted forward a little bit. Okay, that's fine. Told you we needed a nice big area to be working in. And also we can use the backdrop technique in a spot turn as well, but clearly I'm going to have to be selecting new markers as I progress around the turn. So just feeding in a bit of right pedal now. I've lost that initial marker that I had, that's no worries. I'm just going to pick some new ones. I've got some trees there which I'm referencing against the horizon beyond. Losing sight of those now, so looking around to the right, looking for some more markers. Quick glance at my radar just to help me. There's not a lot of features out here as we start looking out to the east. More trees, more markers, still using that backdrop. And as we start lining ourselves back up on the runway, just feeding in a bit of the left pedal just to get ourselves nicely aligned. Back to my original marker, which was that tree, putting the top of that on the horizon, looking at my height, 24 feet. I'm happy with that. I'm not going to get too fussed about 4 feet. Okay, let's land on then. So pre-landing checks. Not a lot has changed with the aircraft. We're still locked and tight. CW, CAD, T's and P's. Yeah, fine. Landing on. So as we land on, keep using those markers. Glance into the right. We don't want to be drifting forwards or backwards as we land on. Lowering the collective, nice and slowly. And lowering the collective all the way to the ground. And there we are. Okay, glancing down. Control centralized. AP comes out. High NR is off. Cancel that. And that's the after landing checks complete. Okay guys, so that's a demonstration then of some basic hovering techniques. So just to summarize, use markers well ahead. Use markers out to the right hand side. But also keep your head moving between those markers, but also you can use the general feel and impression of the ground. The other thing that we don't really have in the sim that we would have in a real aircraft is this sort of chin window by our feet here. Obviously we do have it in the sim, but we can't see it out of the corner of our eye. In the real aircraft we would have that in the corner of our eye, and it does help massively with giving you an impression of drift and also your actual position over the ground as well. So again, another one of those things that we'll find challenging in a flight simulator. But yeah, so use of markers, use of backdrop technique. Okay, hope that helps. If you've got any queries or questions, then let me know. Let me see your videos. It's a challenge. I'm sure you can do a whole lot better than me. I drifted forward quite a bit there. I fly the EC135 professionally for real, and I can guarantee that flying the simulator here in X-Plane is more challenging than the real thing. So if you can do it in the sim, you can do it in the real aircraft. Okay, cheers guys.